Class, Dave Donahue here from Savannah, Georgia. Great to be back with everybody. This week we're talking about component malfunctions. And while I've never had a unanticipated real-world GPS or electronics failure, with my very first CFI, probably my fourth or fifth flight. Well, no, I guess it was probably a little bit more. And it's kind of hard to remember exactly which flight it was, but still very new. Some of the very first flights of using the VOR, and probably what goes through a lot of students' minds with the VOR, and maybe the reason why my very first instructor did this, just to show me not to be get too comfortable with ForeFlight or these wonderful avionics that rely on a power source. He killed the electronics. And looking back, knowing what I know now, like, it kind of makes you wonder about traffic. But he did. He killed the electronics, and he said, with ForeFlight or with your chart, which is what we had pulled up, the VFR chart, we looked at the VOR. We tuned it up. That was near our home field. We weren't too far off home. What we would consider now a local flight, and we dialed the VOR up, put in the heading that we wanted to get to that, and very safely navigate our way back towards the field. I do remember once we got closer, we turned it all back on so we could make our announcements and that sort of thing. But yeah, so never a real world situation, but nevertheless, having that stuff go dark on you, especially with the advent of ForeFlight. If you're utilizing ForeFlight, it's much less spooky a situation, I feel like. So yeah, that was my experience with it. Obviously, that was all VFR flight. If that were to happen, IFR flight, we have our protocol that we go through with. Especially if comms were to get knocked out or something like that, Amy from Avenue F and some of those mnemonics that we can remember. And then same thing applies even in instrument flight. We could refer to our charts and find those MEAs, and those routes, those IFR routes, and hold those altitudes and dial up the VOR for a place that has a VOR approach and still get in. Or yeah. So yeah, that was my experience. It was good training back then, just to show still yet. That's what I was kind of alluding to at first. I remember some of the temptations, especially on my solo cross countries, to just fly by ForeFlight, just fly the magenta lines. And it was from that lesson that I think going into my solos, especially as a private pilot, that you combat that feeling of just wanting to fly the magenta line with remembering those lessons that you were taught, that hey, if this were to go down, I'm not dead in the water, lost up here in the sky. So yeah, that was it. So I'm looking forward to hearing everybody else's. Thanks.